welcome to another episode of the Pinnacle Mindset Show. I'm your host today, Sophie, and I hope that you guys are all staying safe and sane, more importantly, right now. And today we have Steve on the show. Steve, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So would you like to just start off by primarily just introducing yourself to...
Yeah, of course. My name's Stephen Beckerleg. I'm the senior assistant at the moment at National Centre Dublin in Ireland. Started the coaching role back in 2017 when John Rudd became the National Performance Director of Irish Swimming. I've been coaching with Ben Higson now for the past 3.5 years, and everything seems to be going really good at the moment.
Amazing. So first and foremost, how did you get into swimming?
I suppose like most kids do, really. I think my parents just wanted me to learn to swim, to be honest. And I always remember this one moment where we used to swim, and I'm the youngest of 5, and my 2 eldest brothers, they were always at the deep end. And my mum was trying to get me to learn to swim, and she was trying to teach me and everything. I was having none of it because I wanted to go down the deep end with my brothers. So that kind of pushed them towards me being in a club and everything. So that was the age of 5. So learnt to swim at the age of 5, and then moved to Plymouth Leander when I was 7 years old. And then the story from there is went to Plymouth Leander, stayed at Plymouth Leander until I was 22, until I retired just after the 2012 Olympics, which I narrowly missed out on, and kind of fell into coaching, really.
Yeah, so how was that transition initially from swimmer to coach?
It wasn't too strange, because as soon as I kind of retired, I took 2 or 3 years away from the water completely. So I wasn't in touch with Plymouth Leander, wasn't in touch with any other club, just in touch with the likes of Anthony James and other people that were at Plymouth Leander at the time. And when I kind of stepped back in towards the coaching at Plymouth Leander, it was kind of a different group of swimmers, a different crop of swimmers. So they had no preconception of me, and I had no preconception of them. So it was actually completely fine. I can imagine for some people that go straight from the athlete into the coaching role can be quite difficult.
Yeah. So you've obviously kind of discussed a little bit about how you got involved with swimming. What made you decide to go down the coaching route?
It was almost by chance. I came in to see John, because I hadn't seen him in a while. Came in to see Ben Proud, came in to see Ruta, came in to see Anthony James, who I'd swum with since I was 8 years old. And John was just like, look, we need a spare coach. We need another pair of eyes on deck. We need someone to, do the stopwatch holding. And do you fancy coming down 2 or 3 times a week? And I was like, well, yeah, I've got a few spare hours, so why not? And then it kind of just evolved from there, really. When I retired from swimming, I wasn't in the best of places in terms of I didn't really enjoy the sport anymore, which is why I took time away. But as soon as I came back after the 2 or 3 years, it was just like kind of fell in love with it again, if that makes sense. So I don't know what drew me back, if that makes sense, or what drew me to say, let's start coaching again, because obviously, as you know, the early mornings can be a little bit difficult, but it's kind of just evolved from that and then evolved from there, really.
That's amazing. So obviously that transition would have been a big change for you. And obviously you don't coach at Plymouth anymore. So how was the transition from coaching Plymouth to coaching at the Performance Centre in Ireland?
Yeah, so the transition was a little bit strange at first, because we didn't actually have a head coach at the centre until obviously Ben arrived. So I think John left Plymouth Leander in the February of 2017, and he had John Watson on board in the March or the April of 2017, and then I came on board early May 2017. Ben didn't actually start until the new season, so September 2017. So it was myself and Beth Carson who kind of led the program from May all the way through to the Irish Nationals that year. And it was more so not difficult, but a strange one, because you go from being not even an assistant coach, you just go from being a coach at a club to all of a sudden leading the national centre and trying to get the performances out of a group of swimmers that you have no idea kind of from their previous work what they've done, and you're kind of thrown in a deep end, really. But I think sometimes that's almost the best way to learn something new and to grasp something with both hands, because I think if you're not necessarily thrown at a deep end, sometimes you kind of take things for granted. But as being thrown at a deep end, you're having to tread water and kind of make the most of it as quick as you can.
Yeah.
So no, it was strange, but it was really exciting at the same time.
Yeah, a beautiful swimming pun that you've just used there. So top marks for that. But was there a difference in going from a club to a specific performance centre, or was it just the same?
At the time, I would say no. I would say now, throughout the past 3.5 years, there is a noticeable change. I would say at the time, because of who I was coaching and what I was doing at Plymouth Leander, it was almost kind of seamless how it went into the national centre, because I was coaching alongside John at the time, and I was coaching the sprint group with John. So there's only maybe 8 to 12 swimmers in that cohort there and then. And then you go to the national centre in Dublin, there's 10 to 12 swimmers in that cohort. And although it wasn't a sprint group, it was more so kind of 200, 400 based. You still had, the relatively low numbers where you could still, plan and periodize individually rather than just kind of for the masses, per se. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. But now that I look back on it, and especially over the past 3.5 years, the national centre has definitely evolved, and it's more kind of more individually focused, if that makes sense. So although it was individually focused when we first came in, I would say more so now, especially with Ben's leadership and using the Albrecht model, is kind of something that blew my mind away to begin with. I had to kind of sit down and read Jan's book over and over again, and you still flick through pages now and you still don't understand it, but it's kind of been a mind opener, really.
Yeah, and I think like so many athletes and just the sporting world in general forgets that coaches have to learn too. And I think that we can forget that coaches are people. And so moving into the fact that you are a person, and even though you are on a screen, how have you found this past year?
Difficult, like most people, but definitely I do feel very privileged to be doing what I am doing, because I know a lot of people have been stuck at home for a year now. I was only, and Ben and the rest of the coaching team were only stuck at home for the past 10 weeks in that first lockdown from March until kind of the end of May, early June. We've been back in the water since the beginning of June. We haven't missed a beat since the beginning of June, so that's been a great positive for them and for us as well in terms of our mental well-being. But I can only imagine what it's been like. I mean, for my partner, she hasn't worked in over a year now, and although she got pregnant in the May, and we got a newborn now. He's 5 weeks old this Wednesday. It's I can't imagine what it's been like for her. It must have been, while I've been at work, especially, I can imagine it's been a little bit easier for for couples or families that have been at home together, because they can kind of muck in together and they can talk about their issues. But for the people that have been alone, it must have been, and still must be, really, really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. How has it been as a coach trying to, because obviously the Olympics were meant to happen last year, and how has it been from a coach's point of view trying to plan that training for then like trials to get like changed and for the Olympics to get moved? How has that been?
Um, Again, it's been a strange one because we always talk about in swimming about, you know, moving the goalpost. Every time you reach your goal, you then move it on and you reach it, and then you move it on, you move it on. And I suppose it's almost been a little bit of a roller coaster because we didn't know until kind of the last minute that the Olympics weren't going ahead. And now we still don't know officially, you know, obviously they are going ahead at the moment, but again, you're still like, well, the rest of the world is still in this pandemic like we are. So you still kind of don't know, but at the same time, you have to believe in the governments. You have to believe in the, you know, the health services around the world to make sure that, you know, that the people are safe first and foremost. You know, it would be great to have an Olympics, and it'd be great to have all these events back on, but at the same time, you're like, well, you know, there's a greater and a wider population that needs to stay safe first of all. So I think, it has been challenging in terms of from a coach's point of view, but again, we just reset the goals, move the goalposts, and then go for there.
Yeah, and I suppose swimmers and athletes in general are very used to adaptability and they thrive in adversity, I guess. But I can imagine it must be very hard for the athletes who are training right now for Tokyo, not knowing if it's going to go ahead. So how have you put your athletes' kind of well-being, I guess, physically and mentally at the forefront of training right now, or even in the past, I guess?
Well, yeah, so I wouldn't say it's been any different now than it has been before. We always say it's person first and athlete second. I think if you look after the person first and foremost, then the athlete will follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed, you know, from previous years into now. The only thing that has changed is the fact that we don't know when the competition, well, we know that the competition is happening at the moment, but we don't know, you know, kind of what the leaders are saying at the moment. So it's you got to take each day as it comes. You got to make sure that you plan and you periodize for what we know at this point in time. And I think that's one of the great things with the Albrecht model is that you can scale back and you can change your goalposts in terms of your goals, because all you do is you change your training plan and you have your overview and you go through everything with a fine toothpick, and you know it is very seamless when you do have a model to follow. So that has been a massive positive for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And more importantly, thinking about you, how have you put your well-being at the forefront this year?
For me, it's making sure I stay grounded, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say I'm the type of person to get carried away with anything, to be honest, but making sure that I always put things into perspective, making sure that I do put my family first, making sure that I also do put you know, my job as a high priority as well, because again, that's what look after my family at the same time, you know. But making sure that I stay in contact with family at home, because obviously, although I live in Ireland, the rest of my family are back in the UK. So making sure I stay in contact with them and make sure that they still see, because I've got 2 kids now. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-week-old. So making sure that over Zoom and WhatsApp and FaceTime and stuff that they get to see the little ones and stuff. And hopefully when the world does return to normal, because it will do, we can travel again and see each other. But it's almost just realizing that you're not the only one in this. Like most of the world, if not all the world, are in this together at the moment. So you just need to put things into perspective and go, well, the sooner it's over, the better, but I'm not the only one in this mess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you just made an amazing point that we will return back to normal eventually. And I think obviously the sporting world is such a big part of a lot of listeners' identities, but it's a very small part in the person that you are. So what would be your biggest recommendation for athletes right now?
Stay focused and don't lose sight of the ultimate goal, to be honest, because there can be so many different variables throughout a season. And there always are so many different variables throughout any season that I think if you get taken off track or caught off track, then you can fall behind quite quickly. So it's just making sure that they stay focused, making sure that they have one eye on now, but also one eye on the future as well, because ultimately the next Olympic Games is only 3.5 years away.
Yeah.
And the next trials is only 3 years away at the moment. So everything is going to come pretty thick and fast. Next year there's a whole host of different competitions. It's going to be crazy for athletes and crazy for coaches and their families as well. So, it's making sure they got one eye on now, but also on the future as well.
Yeah, definitely. And my next question ties into that. What would be your biggest recommendation for any coaches listening?
To again stay focused, but have that one eye on the future, because it's difficult for the coaches who aren't coaching at the moment, for the athletes that are out of the water, and for the ones that have been out of the water for 10, 12, 14, 16 weeks, however long it's been. You don't want to sacrifice this season for next. It's almost needs to be like, well, what will be this year. But if we can get them into a good place once we return back into the water, then I know that next season can be even better. It can be our best season yet. Because one thing that we found that during that first lockdown, when we had the 10 weeks off, is we kept them on a good dry land program with our S&C coach and the likes of myself and Ben. And they came back and they were in great shape. I mean, I don't know whether that had any benefits in the pool per se, because we haven't really been able to see that just yet. But aesthetically, they were in incredible shape, absolutely incredible shape. And I think it's just making sure that we keep that one eye on the future and don't sacrifice this season for next.
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest things we need to realize, is that if European Juniors gets cancelled, if the Olympics get cancelled, because we still don't know, then you have sacrificed this season for next. There's always making sure that we're building and making sure that we have that one eye on the future.
Yeah, and I think that swimming's one of those sports where if you're not in the pool, then you think, oh, it's all like awful, or like my fitness is just going to deteriorate. But there are so many different ways that you can actually you can actually get better without actually being in the pool. What ways would you give for not just swimmers, even any athletes that aren't maybe doing their sport? Obviously you're probably going to tailor it towards swimming because you're a swim coach, but what ways would you say or give advice for any athletes wanting to get fitter or maintain fitness on land?
Yeah, so I would say stick to the things that you're comfortable with in terms of making sure that you're not getting injured and you're not overtraining. Again, like you said, I'm going to tailor this to swimmers, but swimmers are like fish. As soon as you take them out of the water when they're on land, they tend to get injured. So it's about making sure that the process is slow. You have a methodical approach. You make sure that injury or injury prevention is at the forefront. And it's only really that feel for the water that you lose, like you said, that you can do so many different activities in terms of keeping your fitness levels up and making sure that you stay healthy, but also not just from a physical point of view, but also from a mental point of view as well. Because doing the same thing day in, day out, although athletes are resilient and they are used to that, it can become a bit monotonous when you just stare at the same four walls as well.
Yeah.
Especially during the winter months, which obviously now thankfully we're coming out of. But it's more so for when the athletes or when the swimmers return, is making sure they have that feel for the water, or try to get that feel for the water and that relationship with water again, because that's the thing that they'll miss, and that's the thing that they'll need to work on, not necessarily their fitness, especially if they've been diligent and they've been disciplined over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and you just touched on the winter months, which you're right, thankfully we are coming out of. Do you see a difference in not just your mood, but your athletes or the people around you? Do you see a difference in people's moods during the winter months? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say, I mean, you were a swimmer yourself, and I'm sure you'll agree that the winter months are kind of the most challenging. You go through your short course season, and that's absolutely fine. You're like, oh, this is great. It's short course. It's October. It's November. It's December. And then all of a sudden, Christmas and New Year hit, and you're into some big aerobic capacity block. You're training long course. It's the start of the long course season. You're like, ooh, this is tough. And as a coach, it's kind of the same. You're, as you know yourself, you're up in the early mornings. It's late evenings. The nights come quick. The mornings come even earlier as well, and it can become a little bit monotonous. However, again, you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's only a few months, and then it starts to get brighter. The weather starts to get a little bit nicer. I mean, I don't know what it was like in back in the UK yesterday, but we had lovely weather over here yesterday. It must have been about 13, 14 degrees, and it was almost like here we go, it's coming. It's coming. And I think you do see that from the athlete's point of view as well. They seem to be in a more buoyant mood, and they seem to be happier, smilier. Just like when you go on a training camp, if you go to Tenerife, if you go to a T3 center, you're like, where was all this? So it's because it's because of the winter months.
Yeah, no,
and that's something.
You're so right. Whenever you go in the summer or whenever you go abroad to train, you seem to find like an extra like couple of seconds out of nowhere, just because you are happier. And I guess that just goes into a happy swimmer's a fast swimmer, So before we wrap things up, anybody who has listened to previous episodes know that I always ask the same question at the end of a show from my guests. If you were living in a parallel universe where you could actually host a dinner party, and you could invite somebody who was also not alive, what 3 people would you invite and why?
So I'm good. I might be a little bit controversial here, but I'll explain the reasons why. First of all, it would be my granddad, because I never met him. So I'd like to know kind of what he did as a youngster, points of view on life, and kind of how he saw things, his relationship with my grandmother, and relationship with his kids, obviously my mother and my aunties and my uncles and stuff. So that would be the first one. My next one would be Michael Phelps. One of the, if not the greatest athlete of all time, not just in swimming, but the greatest athlete of all time. And kind of just pick his brains as to kind of his mentality, not necessarily the training he did, because anyone can be tough in training, but kind of his mentality towards adversity, his mentality towards setbacks, his mentality towards when things are going great, how do you then springboard onto the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So I think that would be quite interesting. And then my third one, which is the controversial one, Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
Purely like to find out why he did and why he thought he had to do the things he did. Because there must have been, or obviously there was a mindset behind it. And I would like to pick his brains and find out the reasons behind that, find out what he thought he could achieve from all of the destruction that he did, or whether he even meant any of that, or whether it just kind of escalated and he kind of got stuck on this power trip almost. So it's more so of a finding out and picking people's brains about different things.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So before we close, if anyone wants to pick your brains on what we've discussed today, how would they get in contact with you?
They can get in contact via my social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My name is either Stephen Beckerleg or Steve Beckerleg on all of them. It's a strange second name, so there aren't many out there, so I'm sure you'll be able to find me. But also I have an email address and my work telephone number on the Swim Island website as well, which anyone can access.
Cool, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. Anybody listening, please be sure to like, share, do all of that fun stuff. You all know the score by now, and have an amazing day.